Have you ever noticed how a conversation with your parents can feel like you are speaking different languages, even when you are using the same words? Your grandmother talks about loyalty and staying in one place. Your parents obsess over stability and owning things. You value experiences and flexibility. And Gen Z? They are rewriting the rules entirely, demanding authenticity in ways that make everyone else uncomfortable. Here's something strange. We all grew up on the same planet, often in the same towns, sometimes even in the same houses. Yet we see the world through completely different lenses. We make decisions that baffle each other. We judge behaviors we don't understand. But what if I told you that these differences aren't just about stubbornness or being out of touch? What if the generation you were born into literally shaped the architecture of your mind, the way you process trust, handle uncertainty, and find meaning? Why do we think so differently? And more importantly, what does understanding this do for the wars we are fighting at dinner tables and in comment sections across the world? The invisible architecture. You don't choose the world you are born into. You open your eyes, and there it is, a specific moment in history with its own anxieties, its own promises, its own unspoken rules about what it means to be safe. And here's the thing, your brain is designed to adapt. Not just to your parents or your neighborhood, but to the zeitgeist itself. The collective nervous system of society. When psychologists talk about cohort effects, they are describing something profound. You are not just shaped by your individual experiences. You are shaped by the historical moment that greets you when you are most vulnerable, when your brain is forming its foundational beliefs about how the world works. Think about it. If you are a baby boomer, you were born into a world rebuilt from ashes. Your parents had survived depression and war. The message was clear: scarcity is real, stability is precious, and conformity keeps you safe. Your developing brain absorbed this. It became your baseline. The psychology behind this runs deeper than culture or upbringing. It's about what researchers call cognitive schemas, the mental frameworks we use to interpret reality. And these schemas are built during what developmental psychologists identify as sensitive periods, when your brain is extraordinarily plastic, absorbing patterns from the world around you. The boomer blueprint, building fortresses. Let's talk about the silent generation and baby boomers first. Because understanding them is understanding the foundation everything else is reacting to. If you were born between 1945 and 1964, you entered a world obsessed with never returning to chaos. Your parents clutched at certainty. They built institutions. They created systems. They taught you that success meant climbing a ladder, one rung at a time, no shortcuts, no deviations. Here's what's fascinating. This wasn't just cultural conditioning. Neuroscience shows us that when the brain develops in an environment emphasizing predictability and hierarchy, it actually strengthens certain neural pathways. You become exceptionally good at delayed gratification, at following processes, at respecting established authority. Your generation values loyalty because loyalty was survival. You stayed with one company for 30 years because that company was your fortress against the unpredictability your parents feared. You bought houses and held on to them because ownership was proof you'd escaped the precarity that haunted previous generations. But here's the complexity. What looks like rigidity to younger generations is actually a highly adaptive response to a specific historical reality. Your brain learned that stability equals safety. And you built your entire life around protecting that equation. The attachment theory work of John Bowlby teaches us something crucial here. Early environments don't just influence behavior, they influence what feels right at a visceral level. For boomers, structures don't feel constraining. They feel like home. Gen X, the latchkey revolution. And then came Gen X, born between 1965 and 1980, and something shifted. You were the first generation of true latchkeys. Your parents, especially your mothers, entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. You came home to empty houses. You learned independence not as an aspiration but as a requirement. Here's what's really happening in your psychology. You developed what researchers call a dismissive attachment style at a collective level. Not in a pathological sense, but as an adaptive response. You learned that you couldn't always depend on external structures. So you built internal ones instead. You are skeptical. You are self-reliant. You watch boomers cling to institutions and you think, those will let you down. Because for you, they did. You watched companies downsize your parents. You saw the social contract fracture. You learned that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. The psychology behind this runs deeper than cynicism. When children develop independence prematurely, their brains prioritize self-sufficiency over communal trust. It's not that you don't value relationships, you do, deeply. But you value them differently. You need space within them. You need autonomy. And this is where it gets interesting. Your generation became the bridge. You inherited boomer structures but stopped believing in them. You questioned authority but didn't yet have the tools to dismantle it. So you lived in the tension, cynical but compliant, independent but still playing the game. You are the generation that invented irony as a defense mechanism. Because when you can't trust the systems around you, sometimes the only power you have is to mock them. Millennials, optimism meeting betrayal. Then came millennials, born between 1981 and 1996. And here's the paradox. You were raised with more encouragement, more validation, more, you can be anything, messaging than any generation before you. Your parents, often boomers, wanted to give you what they didn't have. They told you that you were special. They gave you trophies for participation. They removed obstacles and fought your battles. But the truth is, this created a specific psychological vulnerability. When you build an identity around potential rather than resilience, you become deeply destabilized when the world doesn't reflect that potential back to you. You graduated into the Great Recession. You accumulated debt for degrees that promised security but delivered gig work. You watched housing prices skyrocket beyond reach while being told you spent too much on avocado toast. The psychology behind your generation is one of cognitive dissonance on a massive scale. Your internal narrative said, I did everything right. The external reality said, that doesn't matter anymore. And this creates something specific in the brain. When expectations and reality diverge severely, it activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the region responsible for detecting errors and conflicts. You are living in a constant state of that activation. The world feels wrong because it violates the fundamental pattern you were taught. But here's what's fascinating. This betrayal radicalized you in a specific way. You didn't become cynical like Gen X. You became idealistic but angry. You still believe in collective action, in fixing broken systems, in the possibility of change. But you also feel the urgency, because you've lived the consequences of those broken systems. You value experiences over things not just because you are killing industries, but because ownership was promised to you and then snatched away. So you pivoted. If you can't have stability, you'll have meaning. If you can't build equity, you'll build memories. The shift toward mental health awareness, therapy culture, and emotional processing? That's millennial psychology externalizing its internal conflict. You are the first generation to collectively say, this anxiety we are feeling isn't individual pathology, it's a rational response to systemic dysfunction. Gen Z, native citizens of chaos. And then there's Gen Z, born between 1997 and 2012. You never had the luxury of illusion. You don't remember a world before school shootings, before climate anxiety, before algorithms. You grew up with the internet as your third parent, one that showed you everything, unfiltered, all at once. Here's the thing. When your brain develops with constant access to global catastrophe, it fundamentally changes your threat assessment system. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear, is activated more frequently. Not in a way that makes you more fearful necessarily, but in a way that makes you hyper-aware. You are the most anxious generation on record. But you are also the most pragmatic. You don't have time for the ideological battles older generations fight because you are looking at existential timelines. Climate change isn't a debate for you, it's the backdrop of your entire life. The psychology behind this runs deeper than pessimism. Researchers studying Gen Z find something unexpected. You have a collapse of temporal distance. The future doesn't feel distant and abstract. It feels immediate and urgent. This changes everything about how you make decisions. You demand authenticity because you've seen too much performance. You've watched influencers curate perfect lives. You've seen politicians lie in real time. You've observed older generations cling to comfortable narratives while the world burns. So you stripped away the pretense. You talk about mental health openly, not because you are weak, but because you refuse to pretend. You question gender norms, career paths, and relationship structures because you've seen those structures fail everyone who came before you. And here's where it gets complex. Older generations see this as nihilism or entitlement. But what if it's actually the most adaptive response possible to the world you've inherited? Your generation understands something the others are still learning. The old scripts don't work anymore. And rather than desperately trying to revive them, you are writing new ones. The hidden mechanism: collective nervous systems. But here's the truth that ties all of this together. Generations aren't just experiencing different historical moments. They are developing different relationships with uncertainty itself. There's a concept in psychology called ambiguity tolerance, your capacity to sit with not knowing, to function in unclear situations. And this tolerance is shaped dramatically by the world you are born into. Boomers developed in a world that promised, follow the rules, get the reward. Low ambiguity, high certainty. Their brains optimized for that environment. Gen X saw those promises break. They increased their ambiguity tolerance defensively, expecting less, trusting less, protecting more. Millennials were promised clarity but received chaos. They are stuck in the painful middle, longing for certainty but living in ambiguity. Gen Z never expected certainty. They are native to ambiguity. It's not a bug in their system, it's the operating system itself. And this is where it gets interesting. These aren't better or worse adaptations. They are different responses to different worlds. Mirror neurons, the brain cells that fire both when we act and when we observe others acting, show us something crucial. We are neurologically wired to synchronize with the people around us. But when generational experiences diverge so dramatically, that synchronization breaks down. Your grandmother's brain is literally resonating at a different frequency than yours. Not metaphorically. Actually. Her stress responses, her dopamine patterns, her neural timing, all calibrated to a different reality. The cost of incomprehension. And maybe this is the real tragedy. We pathologize each other's adaptations. Boomers see millennial anxiety and think, weakness. They don't see a nervous system responding rationally to systemic instability. Millennials see boomer rigidity and think, selfishness. They don't see a trauma response from people whose parents survived world wars. Gen X sees everyone's drama and thinks, performative. They don't recognize that not everyone learned to lock their emotions away. Gen Z sees older generations clinging to failing systems and thinks, complicity. They don't understand the psychological cost of abandoning everything you built your identity around. But here's what's fascinating. These judgments are themselves generational adaptations. Each generation develops its own defense mechanism against the anxiety of the others. The psychology behind this runs deeper than disagreement. It's about threat perception. When someone's behavior violates your fundamental schema of how the world works, your brain processes it as a threat. Not because you are closed-minded, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do, protect the worldview that has kept you safe. This is why generational conflicts feel so visceral. They are not just intellectual differences. They are existential ones. The integration. So where does this leave us? Here's the thing. Understanding the psychology behind generational differences doesn't erase them. But it does something more important. It transforms judgment into curiosity. When you realize your parents' obsession with financial security comes from a brain shaped by actual scarcity, their nagging takes on different meaning. When you understand your own generation's anxiety as a rational response rather than personal failure, you stop fighting yourself. When you see that Gen Z's boundary setting isn't disrespect but survival adaptation, you can actually hear what they are saying. The truth is, every generation is carrying forward both the gifts and the wounds of their historical moment. Boomers gave us institutional thinking and work ethic, but also rigidity. Gen X gave us skepticism and independence, but also disconnection. Millennials gave us emotional awareness and social consciousness, but also paralytic self-examination. Gen Z is giving us radical authenticity and systems thinking, but also a collapse of temporal grounding. We need all of it. The question is, can we hold the tension? The deeper truth. But here's what's really happening beneath all of this. Every generation is trying to solve for safety using different tools. Your grandparents used conformity and loyalty. Your parents used achievement and accumulation. You might use flexibility and meaning. Your kids might use community and transparency. None of these are wrong. They are responses to the question every human brain is constantly asking, how do I survive in this world? The developmental psychologist Erik Erikson taught us that each life stage brings a specific crisis to resolve. But what if each generation does too? What if boomers are collectively working through industry versus inferiority on a civilizational scale? Gen X through identity versus role confusion? Millennials through intimacy versus isolation? Gen Z through integrity versus despair, arriving at questions of meaning earlier than any generation before them? These aren't individual journeys. They are collective ones. And they are all happening simultaneously, at the same dinner table. The invitation. So here's what I want you to consider. What if the person across from you, the one whose choices make no sense, whose values feel alien, whose anxiety manifests completely differently than yours, what if they are not broken or blind or selfish? What if they are just operating from a brain calibrated to a different world? And what if your judgment of them is actually your own nervous system trying to defend against the terrifying possibility that your worldview might not be universal? This doesn't mean accepting harm. It doesn't mean tolerating injustice. Some generational patterns need to break. Some adaptations have become maladaptive. But it does mean approaching the difference with curiosity instead of contempt. It means asking, what world shaped you, instead of, what's wrong with you? It means recognizing that psychological development doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in context. And context is everything. The closing truth. Here's the final thing. You didn't choose the world you were born into. But you do get to choose what you do with the psychology it gave you. You can let your generational conditioning become your prison, defending it, justifying it, attacking anyone who threatens it. Or you can hold it lightly. Honor it as the adaptation it is. Thank it for keeping you safe. And then ask, what does this moment, right now, actually require? Because here's the truth. The world is changing faster than generational psychology can keep up. We are all becoming immigrants to the future. And the old maps don't work anymore, for anyone. Maybe that's the real opportunity. Maybe when all our certainties collapse simultaneously, we finally have a chance to build something together. Not by erasing our differences, but by understanding them deeply enough to stop being threatened by them. Your grandmother's need for stability is valid. Your parents' exhaustion is valid. Your anxiety is valid. Gen Z's urgency is valid. All of it. Simultaneously. Held in the same trembling hands. And maybe that's how we move forward. Not by winning the generational wars, but by recognizing we are all just scared kids in different-sized bodies, trying to feel safe in a world that never promised to keep us that way. The psychology behind every generation is ultimately the psychology of survival. We are all just doing our best with the tools we were given. And perhaps understanding that, truly understanding it, is the first step toward giving ourselves and each other a little more grace. If this resonated with you, take a moment and think about one person from a different generation who frustrates you. What world shaped them? What were they trying to survive? You don't have to agree with them. But maybe you can see them. That's where connection begins.